This is the alternator that came with the Truckster, and in the first few hours when I was trying to straighten out all the wiring, when I was running this thing up and down the road, smoke came out the alternator, so I'm pretty sure it doesn't work, so I ordered a new one. The new alternator, I think it's the same physical dimensions, but the back is rotated, so I pulled out the 4 bolts, and I think I can just rotate it. I think. Oh, we got to pull it out. I have to put the phone down. Oh boy, I got myself in a pickle now. I tried to rotate this thing. They call it clocking the alternator to get the back end facing in the right direction. And something came loose and I can't get it back. So I was going to take the pulley off. And it's really, really tight. So I put a wrench in the vise and I had an Allen wrench and I was pulling on it with a cheater pipe. And it broke. I've never broken an Allen wrench before, especially one of these big ones. Man, so I can't get it back together. It's not worth anything for me now. I got to fix it. So I think I'll put this part in the vise and try to turn the wrench. It's all awkward, awkward, awkward. I got it to break loose. It took double wrenches and the stub of the Allen wrench in the vise, and it came loose. Man, thing was tight. I won't be able to get it that tight putting it back. I hope I can get it back. So I know what I did. When the shaft came out a little bit, that bottom brush popped out and I couldn't get it back, and I had a feeling that's what it was. So I need to push the brushes back, and looks like they have a little hole to lock them in place, and I wonder if it matches up. Oh, there's a hole all the way through. So I need to put like a toothpick or something in there to hold the brushes in, and then put the commutator or whatever this thing's called back in there, and then pull that piece of wire. Never done this before. Oh my goodness, my shaky hands were definitely not an asset in that deal, especially on that bottom one. Man, it took 2 fingers and there's only room for 1. But I got them. I got both of them in there, and I got this stainless steel welding rod from the back. So now the armature part should slide in there. Well, don't mess anything up, and I got to put the phone down. It should have taken 5 minutes, but it took an hour, but I got it back together, and I'm pretty sure I didn't break anything. Now, when I pull this, it should still turn. Oh yeah, we're good. I just need to put this back and tighten it back up to about 400 foot-pounds or whatever it was. I'll just get it as tight as I can. Let's see, then it went this way, and then the lock washer, and then the nut. We'll tighten it up. It's not going to be as tight as it was, I promise you. All of the original wires are going to be too short because they were wired up right here, and now we need to be wired up right here, and besides they were all jacked up. So I'm going to drill a new hole, put this little plastic bushing thing in there, and wire up from this end and pull the wires loose on the other end, and leave enough slack so that I can stand this up in the future. So when I start adding switches and stuff, I can just take all the bolts up and stand this up and be able to get to the wires, and then make them up down there after the fact. Time to drill holes. I don't have a whole lot of stuff right now. An ignition switch, I got the alternator LED, and I got an ammeter. I will have lights, and hopefully one day a winch on the front. And I would like to have an oil pressure gauge. I think it has a sender on the engine. And I wouldn't mind having a temperature gauge, but I don't know if that's a thing on air-cooled engines. I don't know if you do temperature gauges. So I think I'm going to kind of not put everything in the middle, because that'll screw me up. I think the key switch could kind of go here, and the little light could go above it, and then leave room for switches. And then I'll put this ammeter here, and maybe could put 2 more. I don't want to put it in the middle. I want to put it kind of low. So decisions, and I got to drill the right size holes for each one. I think I got this under control. The gray wire comes from the alternator. The red wire goes straight to the battery. So then the blue wire feeds from the battery side to the switch, which says battery. Now on the switch, the green wire is ignition. So when you have the switch on, that makes the coils hot. But it also feeds this little red wire, which goes through the LED light. And LED is it's a diode, light emitting diode. And then it sends electricity to tickle the alternator so the alternator can start. But once the alternator starts, it doesn't need this voltage anymore, or it'll backfeed a higher voltage, and this diode would turn that off. So like an old car from the 60s, when you turn the key on, the orange light comes on, and then once it starts, the light goes off. This is the exact same thing. This is pre-electronics, I guess. So I got them color coded. I'm gonna bundle them up and make them safe, and then pull them out from the bottom and make them up. I think I got, oh yeah, and the red one is the start. The red one's the start. And I don't have any accessories. Now probably at some point put a switch for lights. I'll have headlights. And at some point it'd be nice to put a winch on the front of this thing. But that's down the road. Whew, deep breath. I think I have everything correct. I did have one problem. The battery connection, this one, I cut and put a I end on it to put on the solenoid, and the threads are so stripped that it was all I could do to get the original battery connection back on there. So I'd already cut the wire, unfortunately, so I put a splice, and I now have it hooked up to the battery. But I will get a new solenoid because I want it to be hooked up there. Other than that, I don't know, should be able to start it. When I turn the key on, this light ought to come on. It cranks. Choke it. Charging. The light went off. This is awesome. I'm gonna go for a ride. We've got a problem. And I think it's a common problem when people put electric fuel pumps on carburetor engines. It's electric fuel pump, although it's only 5 PSI supposedly, it's more than the float and the needle valve can hold back. So it tends to flood out the engine. I just started it, started fine, and then gas started coming out to the carburetor because the bowl's overfilled. I did that in the beginning. I cleaned the carburetor real good and it quit for a while, but obviously it's starting again, so it must just be too much, or it's right on the edge, like right on the edge in a perfect condition. The flow to hold it back, but not all the time. So I did some research, and online I found out that the original fuel pump, which is down there, which apparently doesn't work anymore because it's been bypassed, had a built-in pressure relief so that it couldn't pump too much fuel. Any extra pressure would go back to the fuel tank. Now, that fuel pump may not work, but the pressure relief part of it might work. So I'm gonna take it off and take it apart and check it out, and I might be able to use that pressure relief valve with this electric fuel pump and solve my problem. It's a long shot, but we'll take it off and try it. Need to take it off anyway because it's just a bunch of junk that doesn't work. When I saw the Phillips head screws that were in this thing, and it's down there where you can hardly even see it and reach it, I went, oh my God, this is gonna be terrible. It's so hard to get enough pressure on a Phillips screw or a slotted screw in a difficult spot to get it undone, but they came out. They were loose actually, and I think that's why there's oil all over this thing. I think it's been leaking. So this is out. I cut me a little plate out of a piece of aluminum. I'm replacing the bolts with hex bolts. I need to plug the hole because it's open to the crankcase, so I'm gonna do that before I go any further so I don't forget. So where the fuel pump was, we now have an aluminum plate, and hopefully that won't leak oil. Now let's go take that fuel pump apart and see if we can make it work for a fuel pressure regulator. So the old man was totally wrong about the fuel pump having a regulator in it. It just has an innie and an outie, so there's no way it can adjust pressure. But this thing that was right after the fuel pump, it was right here, has an innie and an outie. So this thing must be some sort of pressure regulator. And now somebody has bypassed all this, so I don't know if this thing works, if it's clogged up or whatever, but I'm gonna do some investigation. Should be able to tell just by blowing on it, maybe. I might have fixed it. So I started blowing on this end, and most of the air wanted to come out this bypass. And I know this is a bypass because it's a smaller diameter line that goes back to the tank. Very little would go out here. And if I'd hold this with my finger, very little, I could barely get any air to come out this hole. So I sprayed a bunch of O'Reilly carbon choke cleaner through all the different holes, back and forth, and all of a sudden something blew out. And now, still most of the air wants to come out of here, but I can hold this and a lot of air will come out of here. So I don't know whether it's plugged or I just dissolved some sort of gasket, or I don't know, but I'm gonna put it in line. That's easy enough, just to cut the hose and stick it in there and see if that'll prevent my carburetor from flooding all the time. So I got this contraption mounted in the fuel line after the fuel pump, and the bypass is just going down there and dumping into a plastic fuel tank because it's too short to go back to the gas tank, and they're all old and rotted anyway, so that all my fuel lines I get replaced. So I don't know, let's see what happens. Choke. One of my viewers suggested just drilling and tapping that aluminum plate that I covered the hole in the block and hooking up a little vacuum pump like most of the modern big lawnmower engines use, but which is probably the right simple thing to do, but I had already started on this contraption, so I kept going. This is what I'm going to call my day tank. It's a gravity tank that is fed from the electric fuel pump, and this will feed gas up high above the motor to this little tank where it'll gravity feed the carburetor and hopefully take care of that problem of fuel pouring out the front of the carburetor, which it's not supposed to do. I was hoping to use that little air compressor tank that's on the floor down there to my right or to the left side of the screen, but it's too big in diameter and it won't fit behind the seat without the bed hitting it when you use the dump bed feature. So found a piece of pipe, I think this is an old fence post, and cut it to suitable length, and I'm cleaning off the nasty welds that were on here so I can weld the end cap on each end and make this into a sealed tank. So this is going to be a combination enclosures and mounting flange because it has little flange on the bottom. This is perfect. I'm gonna cut out 2 of these. So I think I got everything I need. I got my end plates cut. I got holes drilled for mounting. I sanded them clean, and I sanded and sandblasted the inside of the pipe, so it's pretty clean, probably cleaner than the fuel tank. So fittings wise, this will be a vent toward the top of the tank, and I think I'll put a couple of loops of copper so it won't just leak all over the place. The 1/2 inch will be, one of these is not 1/2 inch. Okay, but there'll be a 1/2 inch about 2/3 up. That'll go back to the tank. There will be this one at the bottom, or anywhere really, from the fuel pump. And this one about halfway up to the carburetor. So what's gonna happen is when you turn the key on, the fuel pump's gonna fill this thing up. And it may take a while to first go around. When it gets to a certain elevation, it's just going to drain back into the tank. So there'll never be pressure on it. There'll just be gasoline in it. And then somewhere below the gasoline level, we'll just gravity feed the carburetor, because the other day the carburetor did great on gravity feed. And then the tank is not vented. So while I'm at it, I'm going to put a vent here. And since this thing is connected to the tank with a 1/2 inch line, it should all be vented. So I think I'm going to try to braze this thing together. I think I'll do a better job brazing than welding. I got it all cleaned up though, so hopefully we'll get a good braze. This shouldn't take too long. So I got my fittings stuck from the inside out. Let's see if old Shaky can get a decent braze job on that. So it turns out all the fittings I am going to use, or I did use, they're not a true bronze. They have some zinc in them. It makes it kind of tricky to braze because when you get them hot, that zinc wants to like boil out of them. Did the best I could, and I thought I had them leak proof, but we'll find out when I put some pressure on the tank. I'm semi-optimistic that these things are not going to leak. I don't really have a way to test them until I put it all together, and then my only option will be to do them from the outside. I guess if I have a leak, I will go to the store and buy some silver solder. I don't have any, and try to fix them from the outside with silver solder. But I'm like 90% confident I'm going to be good. So we'll put the end caps on and bring it home, fit it out. I got it brazed all the way around, and it is it's pretty damn hot right now. But I think if I can find a piece of tubing to go from here to here, I can put some air pressure in there and some soapy water and kind of do a preliminary leak check. That'd be good before I leave here and go home. But yeah, it's looking good though. Status of the day tank. I had originally brazed it with a TIG torch, which has advantages. It heats up really, really quick, but it tends to, I don't know, I guess probably because of my talent, it'll make some braze melt here and then here and then here and then here, but not all together. So you gotta keep going back and forth. So what I did yesterday was I put some flux on the existing braze, and I got the gas torch, and I put another layer of braze over it. And the gas torch heats a big area, so it kind of flowed in a little better. So I haven't tested it. I'm pretty sure that these leaks are taken care of. And then I got a nice heavy coat of epoxy paint on it. And then I tried to braze. I had a couple of leaks where these fittings were brazed from the inside. And I tried to put a little braze on the outside. I tried to solder, and it ended up melting this one off, which is a problem. So I just drilled a hole, and this is a, I don't know what you call it, a nipple by nipple, like a connector. So half of it's inside and half of it's outside. Cleaned it real well, put some JB Weld, and then when that set up a little bit, I got it coated with this epoxy paint. This is some Tunemic Series 61, so pretty good stuff. So I'm calling it good. I'm gonna mount it and cross my fingers and hope it doesn't leak. If it does, I'll just have to clean it and put some more epoxy on it because I can't weld it, I can't solder it. So successfully drilled the hole, put the fitting in there, and got some epoxy on it. And tomorrow we'll dump out the fuel, maybe flush it a few times, and try to get my drill bit out. Of course, the drill bit fell in the hole as soon as the drill punched through. So there's a very expensive drill bit in the bottom of that water somewhere, but it shouldn't be hard to get out. And there's a lot of junk. There's a fuel float, and I have a feeling it used to be cork. The little floaty part that goes on the end of that arm, because it was all falling apart. There's lots of little black chunks came out the tank, and I don't plan on using that, so I'll just keep hosing it out till I get clean water flowing out, and then we'll put it back in service. And this fitting is glued into the top of the tank, and it's dry. Everything's lovely, and I got to get the water out of the tank and my drill bit, which is in there somewhere. Put this little adapter on the end of the vacuum cleaner to try to vacuum out the water, and it didn't work very well. But then I rehooked the hose to the blow side of the vacuum and just stuck the hose in there and let it blow for a while, and that worked really good. It's dry inside now. Kind of crusty, but it's dry. So my transition from changing this thing from fuel being pumped to the carburetor with this electric fuel pump to fuel being gravity fed to the carburetor is done, I think. So what we got here is same feed comes off the bottom of the tank, goes through another new filter, goes through the fuel pump, but instead of going to the carburetor like it did before, it goes to fill this little tank up. This is like, I don't know what I call it, a day tank maybe. This is it right here. It's gonna fill up the tank until it gets to here, to this level, and this is open back into the main tank, so it's going to circulate, and this tank should always stay about this full. Now on the other end, this hose coming off the bottom goes through a fuel filter, and this will be gravity, and that's what's feeding the carburetor. Should never have any pressure on it, because pressure can't build, because it'll just dump back into the big tank. And as I use fuel, this is a vent, so we'll be able to pull air into the tank, so I shouldn't get a vacuum, which is a problem before, and it's mainly because this top is not vented. The other one, the original one, well, the original one didn't have a gasket, so shoot, it's time to try it and turn on the key. You can hear the fuel pump pumping. It's probably going to be a while before this fills up, because that fuel pump's not super fast. But I'm going to keep an eye on this. Look at that. It's already got some gas going in here. Let's start the engine, see what happens. Okay, so we are running off of gravity fuel instead of pressurized fuel. It's idling. Still cold. I just started. Fuel pouring out the front like it used to. Well, I guess this is good. Let's go try it out. Well, I had a little scare. I had some gasoline back here, and I went, oh no, it's still leaking, but I just didn't tighten this clamp, so there was some spillage. But everything is copacetic. I'm gonna load this on the trailer next time I go to the country and bring it out there and not work on it for a while. So super happy. Well, I spoke too soon. I smelled gas, and sure enough, it's dripping, which means the float is not able to even stop. What is this? 12 inches of gasoline? That's like a half a PSI. So I opened up the carburetor, and I found that the little gasket we made the other night when everybody was trying to figure out the Truckster problem, it was not set right, and it was holding the float, and that was helping to, well, that was looked like the cause of the gasoline pouring out the carburetor. So I actually had some real gasket material, and it took quite a few tries, but I cut one that fit, and it's in the carburetor now. I thought I had it licked. Nope, still pouring gas out the carburetor. So I have ordered another one, but it is not a Truckster carburetor. It is just a carburetor. So we'll see if we can make it work. This Cushman carburetor has been apart a bunch of times, and every time it does the same thing. The float valve does not stop the flow of fuel. So I took a $40 gamble. I bought a new carburetor. This is not a Cushman carburetor. The Cushman carburetor is $200. This is just a generic carburetor for a 20-something horsepower motor. The flange is almost the same size. The throttle is on the right side. The fuel is on the correct side. The choke's on the opposite side, but I don't think that's a problem. I'm gonna put it in there. I don't know why it wouldn't work. It may not work optimally, but I don't want optimum. I want the thing to idle, and I want a little bit of power. I'm never gonna go full horsepower on this thing. It's got pretty torquey. Let's put it together, see what happens. Well, it has never really run this good, but it has to have the choke almost closed in order to run right. So to me that means it's not getting enough gas. So are the jets just too small for this engine? Or is my fuel delivery contraption not working? I guess I could hook it up directly to the fuel pump. Try that. All right, I'm wondering, and that's usually not a good sign, but maybe the old carburetors are definitely not designed to handle the pressure from electric fuel pumps, because I've read too many different posts about that same exact problem. I wonder if the new carburetors are not designed for a low fuel pressure, because right now I just got gravity. I probably have just a couple of ounces of fuel pressure. I wonder what will happen if I hook up the electric fuel pump directly to the carburetor and try to run it. That's going to be a really easy check. Might solve the problem. But to do that, I got to get to the tank. To get to the tank, I got to raise the bed. To raise the bed, I got to start the engine, and it's early, and this thing is very noisy. So I'm gonna give my neighbors a break and wait an hour or two, and then I'm gonna do it. That didn't work. We're pouring out gas again. Try something else. So the original carburetor had this thing to adapt it to the air filter plenum. The new carburetor has not. So I learned something about carburetors. Apparently, they're not all the same. Yeah, that's obvious. I believe because this engine is such a slow-turning engine that the air velocity through the carburetor is very low, as opposed to modern like lawnmower engines that kind of scream. They spin really fast, and I think the air must go through the carburetor faster, because we were never able to get the new carburetor to suck enough fuel. It always had to have a choke on. And other people smarter than me were looking at it, and we just couldn't do it. So finally ordered a carburetor kit and a new float for the old carburetor. It's kind of hard because there's no part numbers. You're just kind of guessing. The float did not fit, but the needle valve did fit, and the bowl gasket fit, which was nice because we had a kind of a Yankee bowl gasket. And put it together, and lo and behold, everything's lovely. It's not leaking. It's running pretty good. Of course, it idles better with this new carburetor than it does with the old carburetor. So I got it. It's running, and the exhaust is complete. And I'm bringing it out to the country, and I'm going to use it for a couple months and see how it does. If the bed will dump dirt, hold a decent amount of dirt, I'm going to keep it. If it won't, I'm going to move on and sell it and get something that'll haul dirt, maybe just a trailer behind a 4x4. But anyway, it's been an adventure, a little bit frustrating, but we got to the bottom of it, and everything's harder when you don't know what you're doing.
You're doing a fine job.